Welcome to Monday Rewind. I'm Cider. I usually read the news on this channel, and over here is Jacob Smith, Society Reviews, our film critic and contributor to Bounding into Comics. As you can see from the title below, we're talking about Jenna Ortega's latest Hollywood mix-up, trouble, whatever you'd like to call it, that seemed to kind of like pirouette, roll, somersault, or jump out of a flaming building
hmm
into the lava pit that is Vince McMahon's current situation. So, welcome aboard.
Yeah, it's almost as if this film was very, very unfortunately timed, given all the circumstances and what was alleged here. It's very interesting that we got content like this. So, I guess I should go ahead and start this one off here. Obviously, the movie that I reviewed this weekend, I wanted it to because I still have another one coming up that I have ready tonight. But is Miller's Girl, and Miller's Girl was a film that was brought together because Jenna Ortega, as you guys have known over the last couple of years, honestly, has become the new Hollywood it girl. She's definitely become like the new next big thing. The Wednesday show on Netflix has certainly blew up her star profile. She's had a couple of run-ins in the Scream franchise, even though she's no longer in Scream because of some post about Israel, Palestine, and stuff like that. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. But they decided that no, hey, we think that this girl is so popular that she can lead her own film, and they decided to put her in a movie with Martin Short entitled Miller's Girl. And the too long didn't read synopsis of the story is that you have a girl who is living on her own inexplicably in a small town in Tennessee. Even though with all the terrible southern accents in the film, it sounds like they're in the bayou of Louisiana. Like they sound like they're in Baton
What?
Rouge. Like they all talk like Bobby Boucher, right? But they're in like Middle Tennessee, which like I'm not sure if you've been to Middle Tennessee, but that's not the bayou. So maybe work on your southern dialect there and not just sound like Foghorn or Leghorn. That's a topic for another day. But the setup here is that she goes to our English teacher's class. Apparently, she's really infatuated with him. You could say that she has a major crush on him. She even read his book, and he's like, "Oh my god, like, someone's actually read that book that I put out there 10 years ago that literally no one read, but except for you, apparently." So he's getting attention for the first time in his life because he's married to a drunk writer who really only cares about herself. Never gives him any action. One of those types. Southern drunken woman.
What a
So all of a
surprise.
sudden, this I think they were implying that they were high school. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there was in high school. It didn't look like any college I've ever seen here. So all of a sudden, let's just say like this 17-year-old girl, I'm using that in air quotes, the 17-year-old girl comes up to him and shows all of this interest in him. And it's like, oh my God, it's like, I don't know how to deal with this. Well, they should decide to work together on a creative writing assignment, spend a little more time together, and things got just a little too serious for them. So when she writes him a writing assignment, which is essentially I wouldn't even call it softcore porn, but basically just straight up pornography. He's like, oh, okay, this is getting a little too close now. I can't deal with this anymore. So he essentially rejects her, which turns her into a narcissistic psychopath who
Oh,
decides that she's
as
going to
yeah.
destroy his life basically for kicks. And this is what the film is. It becomes about two girls, both underage, by the way, who decides that they're going to try to attempt to sleep with their English and gym teacher, just for thrills, essentially. And this is essentially how the movie ends. The movie ends with her literally testifying that they had an inappropriate relationship together, and he's trying to essentially save his entire livelihood. And then screen goes black, and that's pretty much the end of the film here. So there's a lot of themes to this film that I felt was very, very odd. One of the things that I've noticed about Hollywood is that they try to do what they like to call black comedies over the last few years. These really dark themed comedy movies, but the last few years especially, they just come off more as misery porn. And it really comes off as like the mind of someone who's just like really, really miserable and unhappy. Like you start reading the content, and it's like, okay, I'm just actually like really uncomfortable with all this. This film was written and directed by a woman called Jade Haley Bartlett, who, if you've never heard of her before, there's a reason. She's literally never wrote or directed a movie before this one. So this is literally her first film ever, and it really comes off as like some middle-aged woman's Tumblr fan fiction about the guy that she had a crush on in high school like 24 years ago, essentially. And that's what this
Wow.
whole entire film comes off as. So I mean,
Sounds
they
like
attack.
50 Shades of Grey, man. It sounds like the Zoomer version of 50 Shades of Grey.
It's 50 Shades of Grey, but instead of like, older women like fantasizing about a young guy, it's a older woman who wrote a character who's like 16, 17 years old who's fantasizing about a guy who's in his 50s. And it's like there's a whole lot of like layers of like psychotic psychotic breakthrough that probably needs to be examined here in this person's mind.
Yeah. And again, I mean, like, as you said, it was like set in a high school, or it seems like it was set in in a place where a
Yeah,
middle-aged
the
man took
theme was very high schoolish. So like if it was college, you can probably give it things like a little bit of a leeway here, but the implication here is that it was high school. Because look, obviously Jenna Ortega is a very very small stature. Let's just call it that way. Some people, I think somebody in our comments earlier was saying that, oh yeah, Hollywood loves doing movies about Lolita type people. So I mean, if you know what that is, I mean, it pretty much fits the bill here. Her co-star here is another actress by the name of Gillian Adon, who's essentially an actress who's actually in her mid-20s, but she's like 4'11", so she also looks like she's underage just by
Mhm.
how small that she is too. So it comes off as very high school. It doesn't look like in any way, shape, or form like this is mature, like college age girls. I put it this way: this is definitely not. Remember the film Wild Things with Nev Campbell and Denise Richards from like the 90s? You remember? You
Yeah.
heard of that movie?
Yeah, a
Yeah,
little bit.
this certainly is not that by any stretch of the imagination here. And this is the other weird thing that I've noticed here over the last couple of years is that with Jenna Ortega, keep in mind she's only 21 years old. I think she's like just turned 21, so she's a very, very young actress. Just by how long she's been in this whole thing. But they've done this thing over the last couple of years where they're trying to turn her into some kind of like sex kitten, sex idol type of thing. But the problem is that even though she's like 21 years old, she still looks like she's like 14 years old. So the implication that they're trying to make her like an attractive, attainable type of body type, which is kind of weird in and of itself too. It's like the whole stature of making people trying to lust for her is a very very odd thing, especially when you put her in the film with a guy who's quite literally 52
Old
years
enough to
old.
be your dad.
Yeah, a couple times over, if we're being completely honest. And I'm pretty sure this is a film that was shot 2 years ago, which would have made her like just barely 18 or 19 years old when this film was actually shot, and he still would have been like 52. So
Mm.
eh.
Yeah. Bit of a pain in the neck with this one. See, I watched a review about it, and, apart from the accents being really strange, I the context of this is really weird. Um, it doesn't want to make an inappropriate relationship between a man and a woman inappropriate on the
Mhm.
girl's side. It wants to make it
Yeah,
seem like some kind of power play. That's the thing, is it wants to make it seem like it's empowering to do this to an older man.
yeah,
And
like
I
somehow she's in control, so it's okay.
you're exactly. Yeah, that's the vibe I got, that it's okay for this inappropriate relationship between these 2 people to happen because the girl is in control. That's the
Yeah.
vibe I got from it. It was
Th-
disgusting.
this is this is quite literally the same excuse that Milo Yiannopoulos used many times to talk about his let's just say high school upbringing. If you guys know who Milo is and know his
Oh,
story,
right,
then
yeah.
you would definitely put the dots together there. But yeah, this is like what they're doing here, and it's just like there's so many things like wrong with this, and it's like I think they were trying to go for some kind of female empowering type of message here, considering the fact that it is a female writer and director. But that would imply here that Jenna Ortega's character is somehow the good guy or the protagonist in the story. There's absolutely no way that you would look at her character as any way, shape, or form empowering or any way, shape, or form I guess honorable, if that's
Same.
what you were going for. It's saying like even that, like even got to a point where like her other friend was like why are you doing this just because he rejected you once and now you want to like destroy his life. But at that point she's in full like girl power, like psycho mode. I mean literally she's just psychotic towards the end of the film. Like just happens on the turn of a dime here that I don't know if Hollywood thinks that these characters that they're promoting to people are actually like identifiable. Like they think that people are really gonna love like this character. It's like no, because we're not like insane. Like there's nothing about this to a normal person that be like, oh yeah, yes, Queen Slay. It's like you're not gonna get that from this film here. That seems to be a major disconnect on how these people quite literally human, because I don't think they human very well with the way that they write these characters.
No. And again, I mean, Hollywood once again proving that it knows nothing about the human condition and would prefer to, I don't know, assume that it
Hmm.
understands the human condition and then frame it like this, that, as we mentioned just a few minutes ago, that it's okay for this abusive relationship to happen because the girl is in control. This is the assumed narrative of the movie because this is all it's ever shown to you. They
Hmm.
show you her being disturbed. I watched Jacob's review here on the channel, so I got a brief idea of what this is about, right? I'm not gonna spend my
Yeah.
money to go see it. Jacob's more than welcome to spend his, but you know,
I'll suffer for everybody else.
yeah, right. He does it so we don't have to. But that's the thing with this is that once again, here comes Hollywood trying to say that underage and inappropriate relationships are a-okay, guys, when the girl is in control. What was the narrative behind Poor Things? It's okay because the girl is in control.
Yep. And I mean, that's been the thing, and we've seen this in our society now. It's like they're promoting this idea, the normalization of sex work, right? Of young girls, oh, it's totally okay to go out there and sleep with as many people as you want and essentially make a whore out of yourself as long as you're the one in control. Then it's all okay, right? But don't promote that male gaze. We don't want women to look sexy just for the pleasure of men, because that's bad. But if you decide to do numerous X-rated videos on your OnlyFans account and essentially sell your soul for money, that's good because you're the one who's in control here. Not that, yeah, you probably shouldn't be doing this due to all the psychological damage that you've been doing to yourself and the years of therapy that you're probably gonna have to sit through as a result of your bad decisions.
Yep. But, it is what it is. And speaking of bad decisions, we've got pretty much the king of them over here with Vince McMahon having all the
Oh
fun in
yeah,
the world.
yeah, pal, yeah. But who this is a whole story that blew up this weekend, and there's still fallout for this whole thing. So it was a wild week for WWE. If you count last week, we did a live stream of the Royal Rumble, and it wasn't a good show. It was actually a very bad show, even from people who hadn't watched wrestling in a long time. There's
What
nothing
a
positive to say
surprise.
about it.
Yeah.
Shocker, right?
Mhm.
But so WWE has this big week where Monday they announced that, hey, we just signed this $5 billion deal with Netflix. So WWE Raw and all this other content is going to go over to Netflix, and we're going to make a whole bunch of money, even though barely anyone's watching our TV shows. Like, make that make sense. But and then they announced that, hey, The Rock is back and he's going to be on the board of directors and he's going to get his name rights back, and he may even have a match at WrestleMania. So all of the news was positive for the first couple of days. Then about Thursday hit, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, here's an allegation from a woman who alleges that Vince McMahon did some, quite literally, some very disgusting things with him and a couple of other people here. Yeah, that's Durag Vince. That's the chairman of the board here. And like I said, if you look into the allegations here, it's some pretty sick and disgusting stuff. And a lot of people were like, oh my God, I can't believe he did this to an employee. He needs to be fired. He needs to be let go. Let's just rewind just a little bit, just for a second. Vince McMahon was the founder, chairman of WWE, owner of WWE, up until about a year ago. What happened was that in 2022, so it'll be about a little over a year and a half ago, there was allegations that he had used company funds, because they're a publicly traded company, to fund some of his NDA, to disclose essentially some of his sexual relationships with a couple of his employees. Right now, not really a big thing on the fact that him and his wife has been separated for quite some time. That's kind of been like an open secret that they're just not really together anymore. So essentially, his boss sleeping with his employees, you can say that on, I guess a moral level, that is definitely something you want to do. You definitely don't want to shit where you eat. But that's the bigger problem of that story, was that he was using
Nice
yeah,
pun.
I walked right into it. I didn't even try
Oh
to
yeah.
say this. But the implication here is that he was using company funds to pay off these women for their silence, right? And that was like a big no-no because the SEC then gets involved and you can get in a lot of legal trouble. So since then, Triple H took over as creative, and Vince McMahon essentially stepped down. Well, he came back a few months later, said, "You know what? I'm selling the company." Ended up selling the company a few months later to WED Endeavor, who owns the UFC as well. They combined UFC and WWE into one parent company, TKO. And now Vince McMahon essentially has no shares in the company, but he has no real power anymore. He's just on the board of directors, and that's about it. Then these allegations come out. People are like, oh, this is horrific. All of a sudden, companies like Slim Jim come out and say, "Hey, if you guys don't drop Vince McMahon from your board of directors, we're going to shut down our sponsorship deal with the WWE." And they just signed a major sponsorship deal with the WWE not too long ago. So that was a lot of money they were looking at losing. Apparently, other sponsors were looking at closing out WWE as well. So Vince McMahon on Friday announced that he's stepping down as the board of directors based on these allegations. While he maintains his innocence from what was alleged in these indiscretions here, essentially he's been Me Too slash blackballed by everyone in the company now. So there's talks about how Ari Emanuel, the guy in charge of Endeavor, wants nothing to do with Vince McMahon anymore. Even if, by some miracle in the next 6 months to a year, we find out these things are all false, he's basically not going to be invited back. Now, he still has to think about 10 to 15% ownership of the shares in the company. So it'll be interesting to see if they force him to sell those shares and just like get rid of him entirely. But so he still has somewhat of a golden parachute tied to this. But Vince McMahon and pretty much his legacy is just being destroyed in real time. And this is the guy who quite literally made pro wrestling what it is today, made it as popularized as it is today. He bought his company from his father going all the way back, talking about the 50s and the 60s with Vince McMahon Sr. He brought WWE or WWF at the time to worldwide prominence in the 1980s with Hulk Hogan, and Hulkamania literally was a craze for the entire nation, the entire world throughout the 1980s. 1990s, he brings WWE back with the Attitude Era, creates guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. And really over the last few years, you've had a handful of guys like John Cena, obviously, Dave Batista, but he's just kind of been growing the WWE brand over the course of the last few years. So there's no way to think of pro wrestling without thinking about Vince McMahon. And as we've seen here, there's a lot of guys in the pro wrestling world whose legacy has just been completely shattered by a various amount of things that have gone on here. Vince McMahon, and now all these allegations are coming out about his alleged sexual indiscretions here. Hulk Hogan, people have had a lot of hate for Hulk Hogan over the last few years because apparently, like 15 years ago, there was a sex tape that got released where he had said the N word, and people were still upset about that. Even to this day, they still haven't forgiven him because he said the N word in a sex tape 20 years ago, even though he's apologized multiple times for it. Ric Flair, people are now trying to cancel Ric Flair based on stories that have happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. And what we're basically seeing here is a continuation of the Me Too era that we've created in our society over the last 10 years, where anyone at any time can dig up an allegation about you from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It doesn't matter. All it needs to be is an allegation. It has to be nasty enough, and then all of a sudden your reputation is destroyed and your legacy is destroyed. And there's really nothing that you can do about it. So one last point about here, and I'll go to you here, Cider. Razorfist did mention this as well. Is some question about whether these allegations here are actually true or not, because apparently what happened was is that while there was an admission a while back ago that there was some kind of relationship with Vince McMahon and this woman who's accusing him, apparently due to the details of their NDA, he was supposed to pay her like $3 million, and apparently he stopped paying her after $1 million. So there's an argument to be made here that apparently this woman has made these allegations in a way to kind of shame Vince McMahon into paying her the rest of the money that she was entitled to based on the NDA. So that could be another thing about, hey, maybe these allegations aren't exactly on the up and up, but there's a lot of people who just want Vince McMahon gone, so they don't really care whether these allegations are true or not. They just want Vince McMahon completely gone and away from the company. So that's kind of where we're at right now with this Vince story. Like I said, it's still there's going to be more things that break about the story as the days go on, because this isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
No, no, and nor should it. I mean, good or bad, what has to come out to the light is what's went on.
Yeah,
This is an American landmark. You know what I mean? This is a
yeah,
brand that's been around through, I would say, most tax-paying Americans' lives. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, we're
Very few
talking.
people precede the WWE.
Yeah, no, just real quick. I mean, like I said, you're talking about, the WWF back in the 1960s with like Bruno San Martino and them selling out Madison Square Garden for almost 20 years just based on that guy. So this is how far back the legacy of this company goes. Like I said, with Vince McMahon Sr., then Vince McMahon taking over and controlling WWE throughout the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s here. So it's like I said, this is a company that's been longer than anybody else here, and we're just seeing not only a change of the guard, but really, like I said, the destroying of an old idol, I guess you could say here.
Yep, and again, like I said, it has to come out because you gotta be able to venerate and excuse the people who were around when this happened. There's at least three generations of wrestlers underneath Mr. McMahon Jr. here, the second,
Yeah.
and 4 under the brand itself at least. So this whole situation that they're in, he needs to be kind of wrung out on this, either for justice or to for his personal justice, to have his name cleared, one or the other, so that
Yeah.
everybody else who was around this time and around this guy doesn't get sunken into this stuff. Because as we heard about this, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, helicoptering his dick at a bar,
Yeah.
that ended up
And
catching people
on
who
an
were at
airplane too.
right, and so people who were just there and didn't, like, immediately grab him and whip him out a window,
Hmm.
they got uh, uh they got blamed with it. They got blamed with participating. Some of them did participate. But that's what I
Yeah.
mean about this is that, like, the kinda crap that goes on with this is good to a degree. It'll clean up the brand, it'll clean up the talent, it'll clean up the people that are either thinking they need to be guilted into silence or guilted into, not supporting Vince's innocence, perhaps. Whatever happens here, this'll clean it out. But her, wanting the rest of the money is an interesting twist, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, when you look at it just on face value, like it's one of these stories where either side could easily be true. It could be easily true that Vince McMahon is a complete sexual deviant, that he's doing these really disgusting things behind closed doors, and it could be completely true that this woman just wants more money, and this is all just a bunch of nonsense and an extortion attempt. Like either one can totally be true, so it's hard to go too hard on one side or the other because there's just not enough details that we know. However, what I think the fallout of this is going to be, and this you already see that some people are being worried about this because there was talks about, well, Triple H is now in charge of creative at WWE, and Triple H is Vince McMahon's son-in-law. He's married to his daughter Stephanie McMahon, and Triple H and Vince McMahon have been very, very tight. Let's just put it that way for well over 30 years. Like these are two have almost been joined at the hip for 30 years, and a lot of people are asking themselves, okay, well, if all of these things were going on and Triple H was essentially Vince McMahon's right hand man for so many years, are we to believe that Triple H knew absolutely nothing about the things that were going on with his father-in-law behind closed doors? Like he had no inkling. He never hear any story or any complaint about Vince that he should have given more credence to. So people are saying, well, what did Triple H know? And there's people trying to be like, no, no, don't go after Triple H, just go after Vince McMahon. It's like, well, this is the problem. You've opened literally a wormhole here that now everyone's going to start asking questions about who knew and who didn't know. Like apparently a couple of years ago, Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Nick Khan, the guys who are kind of running WWE right now. At least Stephanie was until she stepped down a couple of years ago. But it was like they wanted Vince McMahon gone. They voted to essentially get rid of him a couple of years back when this whole thing started. It's like, well, is there any, I guess, motivation for them wanting to get rid of him? Did they know that something was coming along the lines? That would mean that they were at least aware of some of these allegations beforehand that they led to them making that vote in the first place. So it's like, okay, well, who exactly knew? Did any of the wrestlers know? So like, if you really want to start a full-fledged investigation of who has essentially enabled Vince McMahon to do these things over the last 3 decades, there's going to be a massive fallout, and it's not just going to be Vince McMahon going down. There's going to be a whole lot of people going down, a whole lot of people you don't expect going down. I mean, Brock Lesnar was supposed to make a surprise return at the Royal Rumble this Saturday. he got implicated in this story because apparently one of the stories was is that Vince McMahon ordered this woman to have a relationship with Brock Lesnar in order to keep Brock Lesnar in the company, right? So he's now been entangled into this match. Whether that's part of the story is true or not, now he has to be off the TV for the next several months because they can't have him essentially wrestling on TV, being a big star while Vince McMahon is under investigation for allegations that could directly involve him. So who knows what his relationship with WWE is going to be. If Brock decides to sue because his name's been drugged into this, there's a whole lot of people like this. Is a story that potentially be very, very nasty here in the next few months. And there's not a whole lot of, I mean, like I said, they just signed a $5 billion deal with Netflix. If this gets ugly enough, I don't know if Netflix is in any position to be like, maybe we should reconsider this deal, or maybe we didn't know what we were getting into with this company, because apparently they have a lot of skeletons in the closet. I think a lot of people just look at the WWE as, oh, it's a television show, it's television content. We can put them on Monday nights and they can draw about 1.5 million to 2 million viewers, and we'll get a lot. But like, people don't really know just how depraved the pro wrestling industry, the pro wrestling business truly is, because they only see the television aspect of it. Like, if we're going to really get into it, there's been a whole bunch of devious rumors and innuendos going back 4 decades about the behavior of certain wrestlers, both male and female, if you want to get into it. And like I said, if we're in this thing of, no, let's expose it all, or was Cat Williams say all lies will be exposed in 2024, there's a lot of people who are looking to go down in this whole thing. And like I said, I don't think Vince McMahon is going to be the only one biting the bullet here with this story.
Well, speaking of biting the bullet, we have an update about the Suicide Squad killed the Justice League.
No.
Looks like it was pulled 1 hour into early access. That's right, the $100 early access deluxe package, by the way. Only got an hour to play on it before discovering that you had a full completed game.
Uh, it's just imagine it's what's the best way to say it? It's amazing to see just the level of incompetence in the gaming community. It's like they're already like thinking about the revenue that they're going to get from the video games before realizing, yeah, well, we still have to give them a game to be for them to be satisfied with. It's like, oh, we'll fix that in post. Like, that's literally like what video games have become now. Oh, it's glitched out, it doesn't work, it's broken, there's problems. Oh, we'll fix that in post. Just release it now so we can get their money, because that's what's more important to us right now.
So apparently what happened is that there was a bug that gave people a full completed game when they logged out and then logged back in onto the early access servers, as it says right here. The $99 deluxe edition of the game features additional costumes, weapons, battle pass tokens, and more. Those who pre-ordered the special edition would also receive a 72-hour early access ahead of the February 2nd launch, rather.
Yeah.
However, as this early access period began in some territories, issues arose immediately. So they actually put out a post about this. It's how bad it got. And here it is down here. It says, "We're aware that a number of players are currently experiencing an issue whereby upon logging into the game for the first time, they have a full completed story. So that means
Oops.
they got like everything checked off. I don't know if that meant they got all the loot with that or not, because that's a Fallout 76 problem all over again. So to resolve this issue, we will be performing maintenance on the game's servers. The servers to this, the backbone to this, right? During this time of
Yeah.
the game will be unavailable for those early accessors, right? Those people that paid $100 to have 72 hours of unfettered, normie free access to this. That's not going to happen now. We expect this to take several hours, and the end update will be we'll update once we have more information. We apologize for the inconvenience and stealing your fucking money."
We're sorry.
Yeah.
We're sorry. Remember that whole bit?
But that's where you're at with them right now, is that they were so busy trying to get out this weird idea. Here it is again. Look at that. It's a theme for tonight. Inappropriate relationships, particularly
Hmm.
with minors. You have this weird pedo lesbian thing going on with Harley and Ivy, or Ivy's
Ivy, yeah.
resurrection, right? And so, ta-da, they focused on that, put all their energy, all their effort into that, and then the servers give you a free finished game when you show up the first day. You log in, your game's all done for you. Congratulations.
Everything's going great in the world. Yeah, I mean, but we heard the story a lot, and this is kind of like where I think one of the biggest problems here is that, like I said, we live in a gaming culture now where the idea of actually giving people completed games is just kind of like a foreign concept now because everyone's thinking about the microtransactions and how essentially we can make so much money after the game's released. That, like I said, they don't even bother
DLC.
actually. Like I said, they don't even bother actually finishing the game. 'Cause it's like, oh, the unfinished part of it, we'll just put it in as a DLC down the line. We can make more money that way, and it's bred this laziness and this sheer just incompetency within the video game industry. And games are obviously more expensive now than they've ever been before. Most video games that come out today, you don't even actually physically own anymore. You're kind of
Right.
like restricted to a stream library or like a PlayStation server that may or may not be around by the time you want to play the game here in a few years. But I mean, it's just kind of sad. It makes you yearn just for the simpler time of, hey, remember when Nintendo just gave you like this little brick that was this size and you can just play it whatever you wanted to and everyone was happy? Yeah,
Yeah.
remember?
Then they gave you a smaller brick that went in your pocket. You could play that anywhere. Sometimes it was in color.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I had an Atomic Purple.
Dungeon Master Blaster says that is why I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3 right now and have over 500 hours in it. All right. I
Mm-hmm.
can't blame you, man. You know, people are modding Skyrim now to show off the fantasy characters in from their own like self-published universes. So you can buy a Skyrim mod from these publishers that will put their characters with voice actors, their models, and on a separate quest for you inside of Skyrim.
Yep.
That's where you're at, is that people who write novels are making better video games through mods to sell
Mm-hmm.
their novels than the
Yep.
freaking companies making these games.
And if they make too much money, that's when the company will stay in and say, okay, we need to shut this down because you've unironically made something better than we did, and we don't like that.
Big meanies doing
Yeah.
stuff better than us.
And then obviously the other portion of this is the whole scene that's going viral right now with the Suicide Squad game with the whole Batman ending. Like, I'm not sure if we can even play that one here or not, but apparently this is going to be the last time that we see who
Yeah,
was it? What's his name? The voice of Batman. I'm
Kevin
blanking on his
Conroy.
name. Kevin Conway. Last time we're going to see his Batman in any kind of media whatsoever, and he's violently, brutally beaten to death. And it's
Yep.
almost poetic, just in a sense that, you know, literally the second that he dies, it's like, yep, let's brutally kill his character. I mean, I know that wasn't the implication because I'm assuming that, you know, he died after at least the production of this game. Like I said, sometimes it's just so like on the nose about like where we're at. And it's like,
Well, we hope you feel better, Michael Quaid. Gallbladder 2 sounds pretty bad.
ooh, that does
That's a
not sound
sequel.
great. That, that,
But
that sounds what we like to say here, problematic.
we covered this earlier this year when it was the leaks came out about the game that Batman gets done in the story, and he just kind of he's not heroic at all when he goes out. And
No.
so the it was one of those things where they'll go and they'll film a tribute to Paul Walker for that Fast movie where it's just two
Mm-hmm.
cars driving apart, right? And that's
Yep.
way more difficult than going in and using Unity to reshoot a cutscene where a character's death happens. That's a lot harder. They had to redo Paul Walker's face. They had to get everybody out there, rent the cars, close the roads, set everything up, the insurance, all that jazz. Meanwhile,
Yep.
all that Rocksteady had to do was go in, recreate, go into the save file of this environment in Unity or however they made it, Unreal Engine, and not do this. They could have had a completely different ending for Batman. He could have gone out a hero, but beaten like a dog.
No, there's what is the old red letter media bit? It's like, how do you feel to live long enough to see all your favorite franchises go down in flames? And you just reply, it feels great. It feels great.
Well, and again, I mean, like it also falls in with what's going on over to Microsoft is that they're beginning to shift to an all digital future. They make massive cuts to physical game release operations. So this was in tandem with the cuts that they made, over 1,900 cuts. by the way, folks.
Let me ask you this, because maybe you're a little bit more in tune to this than I am. Like the whole aspect of what they're at least trying to sell you now, even though I don't think that's the actual motivation behind it, but it's like, oh well, we're getting away from physical media because it cuts costs for us. We can save a lot more money just by doing digital release rather than doing like physical disc. And it's like, isn't like doing like physical disc or creating physical disc like one of the like cost effective type of ways of like making video game? Basically, what I'm saying is like it doesn't really cost that much to put a video game onto a disc, like does it?
Well, here's the thing. Um, a lot of people don't. This is the market's overreaction to the consumership rejecting the agenda-driven entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're seeing is these DVDs are going out. They're sitting on the shelves. They're not getting a return on. They're just
Yeah.
ending up in landfills, shredded into plastic to be recycled over again. So the situation is that they'll go and put this digital release out now. Now, consider for a moment when you buy a video game, unless it's one of those online ones and you have to pay for that online, like PlayStation, consider this that you the way that they do this now is that you'll be paying a subscription model. So you'll pay $60 for your one copy of Mario Sunshine, right?
Yeah.
Imagine you're only paying $9, but it's every month. Instead of that $60 one time for 1 year or however long till the next Mario game comes out till they get you. That's why it makes more money than the DVD because you only make the sale of the DVD. And that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to maximize your basic apathy, of going in and canceling your subscription when you don't need it. They're even
Hey,
trying to bait
Cider.
you. What's that?
So let me like, check your age here just for a second. Let me see if you're old enough
Sure.
to remember this. Are you old enough to remember a little thing back in the day called Sega Channel?
No.
You remember that?
But
Okay.
I lived in
Well,
Maine, so we didn't like have a lot of like fancy inner city TV stations. So
Well, no, no, it wasn't exactly that. I'll give it back to you. So, about in the mid 1990s, I want to say it was like 95 or 96, like right in the last legs of the Sega Genesis era. This is right before Dreamcast like became a thing, right? What Sega did is that if you remember, if you had your local cable operator at the time, they would essentially give you what was a Sega cartridge. If you remember what Sega cartridges used to be, with the ability to plug in your cable cord directly into the cartridge. And what it would do is that you would pay a monthly fee, and they would give you access to essentially hundreds of video games every single month. The games would change like every single month, so you get like some Sonic games, some Golden Axe, stuff like that. But this is essentially what they give you: is a subscription service where you can play these games that are on like some kind of digital server as many times as you want, and it would go each and every month. This idea, it didn't last very long, only lasted roughly a couple of years. It had more to do with the fact that by the time it came out and it was kind of popularized, Sega was already moving on to the Dreamcast and the Saturn, so it's like they didn't really have much use for the Genesis. But this idea has turned out to be so ahead of its time. This is what they were doing in like 1996, and now
yep.
you see the essentially the video game industry by and large doing this exact same model on basically any platform that you can think of, whether it's Microsoft doing this, Sony, like I said, the developers like Sega, all doing essentially the exact same concept, only because they didn't have the technology at the time, 1996, to do it in a mass kind of production. But like I said, this is what essentially what we're seeing now. All these people are like, nope, we're just gonna move everything into a monthly subscription service. You guys can go play all the games that you want. It's like we're essentially watching the old idea get repackaged as new.
I mean, beer Bared Whiskers here. He's got it. It says, get a subscription, then take the game off the server. Then, too bad. What were you playing? What were you playing? That sorry. That's what
Mm-hmm.
PlayStation did for their customers on some television show that they lost out of their library. They took it out of their physical library, not their physical library, like in their house, but in their hard drive, their physical hard drive. They deleted out of that. The PlayStation deleted it, cut access to it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what'll happen, you'll have your Earthworm Jim game that's on license from Intellivision, and then boom, they'll lose that license for whatever reason, and congratulations, you're never playing that again until they get the license back.
Mm-hmm. Are they giving you a refund? Absolutely not. I
No,
mean, it's
no.
yeah,
You could pay
absolutely not.
another $9 next month, in fact, and we'll take more from you.
Yep. Like, look, I've made this running joke so many times now, but like I said, I still have my PS3, right? And I still have my PS3 by choice because I never saw a reason to get a PS4 because there was no games that really appealed to me on the PS4. Like, if I was gonna get one, it would probably be like a baseball game, something where I can like play like an updated sporting game. But that's pretty much it. There's only a handful of titles that I would even think of. There's still so much better content on the PS3 and the PS2, and to see where we have moved as far as development over the last 10, 15 years with video games. And like I said, these scams now where it's like, yeah, you can spend thousands of dollars on PlayStation content on the market just so you can have everything stowed away on your little brick device here. And then one day Sony says like, oh, no, we're going to shut this whole thing down. It's like, well, I spent so much money. It's like, oh, too bad, that money's gone. Like, I guess you should have had a physical copy, even though we're not selling physical copies anymore. Get wrecked, loser.
Yep, and guess what? Bandai Namco localization teams admit they order Japanese devs, white
Hmm.
people telling the Japanese what to do, okay? Japanese
Yeah.
devs to censor their female character designs. Quote, we tell them that the cleavage is a bit too exposed or that the skirt is a bit too short. That's right. That's right. So
And
guess what's gonna happen though? Let me just think about this, okay? Guess what's gonna happen? Games are gonna come out, they're gonna have like boobies like this, right? And then you're gonna
mhm.
get an update. You're just gonna be logging in, doing your thing, you're having a little bite of sandwich while you're waiting for Call of Duty to boot up. But one game's gonna update, and all of a sudden those boobs are gonna be gone. They're gonna be
Yep.
gone. Boob
And
apocalypse
then
is gonna happen.
about a month later, someone's gonna do an online mod where they're gonna be wearing literally nothing, and then that's gonna
Right,
be the most popular mod to the point where they're gonna have to shut it down because it
right,
goes against what they were trying to do in the first place, right? Like this is kind of
right.
the recurring cycle that we see here. And
Now this brings the next question to me, right? So if this is all on the online streaming based crap that they want to do, so if you switch your VPN to Saudi Arabia, can you hate the gays in your Spider-Man game then? Are you allowed to
hmm
do that there then? What happens? Can you VPN your way into racism? Can you
yeah.
VPN your way into a hate crime? Hmm? I just I don't
I
know.
thought I've
Nobody
honestly
thought this
thought about
through.
this. Just real quick, yeah, no, just quick little side note, but just what you just said there. I've honestly thought about: is there a way I can like get a VPN and find like a Dubai version of Netflix where like all the degeneracy is completely cut out, and it's like, hey, maybe this will actually be like unironically based Netflix. Is
No, that's how
there a
it
way to do
works.
this? Yeah.
If you switch your VPN and over to Japan, for instance, and you go over to go over to Netflix, and it connects to the proper server, congratulations, you now have access to all of the Japanese television shows, their programming. Same thing would happen for Saudi Arabia if you changed your region area to that, your
Hmm.
VPN region to that. And that's how it works. That's how these guys are able to go and like consume all this stuff as it happens because it's like being simulcast in Japan. And because they changed their VPN, the server recognizes that they're a Netflix member, doesn't care where they are in the world though, because people travel all
Yeah.
over, you know.
So because these people can't censor Japan, right? Because this is they've been trying to do this for so long. It's like here in the United States, they basically got us like completely neutered now. Like you guys seen the character models of the characters that are made here in the United States, just absolutely horrific. But they hate that they can't get to Japan, and they're like, there's no way you can cancel Japan or cancel the developers. So here they changed their tactic when it comes to Japan. What they're doing now is that they're presenting themselves as quote unquote the customers, right? So they're trying to trick the Japanese developers into thinking, well, here in America, this is what these people want. And what you're producing to them isn't exactly what's in American interest. So what they're trying to do is that they're trying to convince Japan that, oh no, Americans are all a bunch of social justice warriors who don't like big boobs and short skirts, and you have to craft essentially change your style here to appeal more to an American audience, thinking that, well, if we do this, well, maybe we'll get more Americans, not realizing that they're actually unironically making more people hate their development and hate what they're doing out there. But this is the way they're going to try to do it. They're trying to trick Japan into thinking that we're all a bunch of SJW weirdos, and then to the point where when Japan starts creating these games, you're going to think like, well, in America, this is what they want over here, so this is what we're going to give them. Because there's no voices in there saying that no, stop listening to these people, they're ruining everything.
Well, obviously, we do have Veritas Eterna here. It says, I disagree based on a consistent worldview. Women ought to cover up because they use female bodies as a tool and weapon to get people to watch porn. So beautiful women ought to be covered up, just like men, but this comes from a consistent worldview. And since people in power have no morals and are subjective, can they, hey, promote degeneracy and sexuality? Oh,
Well, I
in
mean,
order to sell products and promote porn.
I would say this. I wouldn't argue too hard against that based on what we talked about the first 30 minutes of this show. So it'd be kind of hard to go back like the other way based on it's like, yeah, I mean, there are people being trapped by their own sexual deviancy. Let's just put it that way here. But yeah, I mean, look, we're at a point right now where here in the West, it feels like let's just say, what's the best way to say this here on YouTube? There's definitely a cultural shift and it's noticeable, and I don't think that is going to end well for the people who are enforcing it because it's going to come to a pass one way or another. That's probably the safest way that I can say it without going full orange hat.
Well, and again, I mean, we're at a space now where if you try to go and restrict this stuff, you're going to end up with people that deliberately go out of their way to make it a taboo and go
Mm-hmm.
beyond decency in order to prove a point because they're dumb like that.
Yeah.
What Japanese approach to this, and see again, like we like to be very judgy for some reason. I don't understand why everybody thinks they're better than Japan. Japan doesn't think they're better than America. I mean, you might
Mm-hmm.
get that attitude out of a few of them, but by and large, they're like, yeah, no, America's cool, and Japan has a lot to learn. Again, we should have that attitude about Japan. We don't need to
Yeah.
copy their society, mind you, but basically why we're seeing this uptick in sexual attitude coming out of them, right? Is because
Mm-hmm.
their country is going through this rapid population crisis, and their government has poured a ton of money into the media to convince people to start having kids again. So that's why you're seeing a lot of media coming out of Japan that is either hypersexualized or there's a lot of body language going on, if you know what I mean. There's a
Yeah.
lot of body.
That's kind of the conflict here because here in the United States, it's like we haven't realized that even though we're seeing the effects of it now, we're rapidly heading towards a point where we're going to have a population crisis here in the next couple of decades ourselves. Because, well, like, I don't know if you've heard the report that went out there basically saying that on one side, you have like women who are becoming far more feminist and left wing, while men are becoming far more conservative and right wing. And clearly, those two are so ideologically opposed that they're not getting married and not having kids. And then we're seeing what's happening with the LGBTQ community growing in numbers. So we're creating a situation here in the United States where we're going to have a population crisis ourselves here in the next few years. But in Japan, they've already accepted that they're having one, and they're trying to course correct. Whether it's too late or not will be another discussion. But I think here in the United States, we haven't exactly realized that, we're basically going to be in the exact same position that they are here in a few years. It's not going to be pretty once that realization settles in.
We do have a super chat though. Coming, I'm not sure what this currency is. I apologize, but there's 2,000 over here from Dizwiz. And Dizwiz asks, why does a mere localizer have a creative decision like this? Um, Because the localizers are treated as cultural ambassadors. That's sort of the
Yeah.
the the kind of double-edged sword to how they navigate and make themselves useful. That's why AI has been replacing them in Japan recently. You may have seen this pop up in some of BIC's articles recently. It's worth a look. What's going on is it's Korean won. My apologies. It's 2,000 Korean wons there. That's what came from Dizwiz. Thank you very much. Um, what's happening here is that the localizers kind of hold the Japanese devs hostage. What this is they go and they say, this isn't going to work in America. You're going to insult people. Your game won't do as well if you put this stuff in here. Or they'll come out and they'll say, well, this is very politically insensitive. And because the Japanese have a policy where they don't like to offend people, they have Hone
Yeah.
and Sone, and Hone tells them to be out in public, and I believe it's Hone is out in public. And so in public, you go along to get along, you stay polite, you try not to offend people. There's laws in Japan that say it's okay to push someone down the stairs if they're going up the wrong way. So that's what's going on here is that the American localizers put like political correctness pressure on the Japanese, who then feel an obligation to make these corrections so that they don't upset people on the West and risk sales. We're Despite China having more people and more consumers, we pay more for the stuff. There's
Yeah.
more American dollars spent on this than the the Chinese. Oh gosh, I don't know what.
Yawn or something like
It's
that.
not that. It's not the yen. It's Chinese yuan.
Yuan.
Yuan, I think.
It's
Something
definitely
like
one that
that.
starts with a Y.
Yeah, something like that. And I'm not trying to be offensive or anything. I just don't trade in it. But again, like
That's the reason.
we spend more of that on these video games than the Chinese do, and that's why they cater to us and why they make these adjustments. Dizwiz is because these localizers insist that they have to, otherwise they're going to upset so many Americans, despite what they know to be true about human nature. You have to understand. And on the other end, you have the DEI requirements on our end that make it law that they have to obey these things, that they have to change these things in order to fit into the US market. So there's two
Yeah.
different things working against them that keep them from expressing themselves like they do in Japan, as you see here with Nami.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it definitely feels like that, this aspect of the cultural war between, like, Japan and the United States is definitely coming to a head. Because even if you take that aspect of it out of there are people out there, obviously. I mean, I'm not sure if you looked at the United States recently, who just generally like the animation and creative style of Japan, and they don't want to see it tainted by essentially American left-wing progressivism. But because, like I said, you have this bridge here with the localizers and developers like in Japan, because they're the ones that are actually in the ear of these companies that are making these products. They're essentially trying to change the culture from afar, and there's a lot of people who don't like that. And like I said, I feel like it's only going to be a matter of time before the country, if Japan starts to fold. Because like you said, we're talking about this idea of, hey, Japan's having a population crisis and we're actually losing population. Well, if you lose population in your own country, you're going to start losing revenue in your own country. So that means that, well, if it gets to the point where it's so bad we can't make money in our own market, we're going to have to outsource in order to survive. And knowing that the US is the biggest market, it's going to come to a point where it's like, hey, we got to do what we do to survive here. And if this is what the quote unquote Americans want, then that's what we're going to do. And like I said, it's going to break the whole system here. So we may only be delaying the inevitable here when it comes to this war and with Japan and America. And like, we could quite literally call it decency laws if you want to.
Well, and again, I mean, their culture is much different than ours. There's a lot of dark things on their end too that make life there very complicated. Um, I just want to put this up to remind people what the Americans did to Faye Valentine and Cowboy Bebop.
Oh
Okay,
yeah,
like this, there's evil, and then there's what they did to Cowboy Bebop. And that
yeah.
and that's however you feel about that show, and whether you're aware of it or not, had any interest in the anime before this or whatnot. That show is a cultural phenomenon. It was originally banned in Japan and it aired in the US first. It's a it's a milestone in Japanese entertainment getting out of the country. And so because of its popularity in America, the Japanese company that originally banned it with the government regulations on it fought for it and got it released in America. So it's one of those things where like we have a long history, good relationship with Japan, in my opinion. I believe that the world has the the best peace. Like there's the most peace in the world. There's still
Hmm.
violence, there's still war in places, but there's overall peace when the U.S. and Japan have good foreign relations. You can go back through history. Whenever the U.S. and Japan are on good footing and we have like a cultural synergy to one another, everything's great. Everything's on the up and up. Everybody's making money. Everybody's living comfortable. The morality's high. The morale itself is high. That kind of stuff. But when we fall out of sync, man, it goes all to hell. And we're headed into that now, where Japan is pushing back against what the U.S. is trying to do culturally with them. Um, if you don't know, Rahm Emanuel, Obama's chief of staff, is
The
the
brother of
um,
Ari.
is the ambassador by the to Japan, and he pressured their Congress into approving same-sex marriage laws recently.
Yeah.
So, and again, this isn't difficult. All you do is they say we're just going to make sure that you don't get enough aid money because the U.S. sends almost
Hmm.
$6 billion to Japan annually in aid money. It's
Yeah.
World War II
Well, keep
payment
in
stuff.
mind when Obama was actually president, his big thing was pressuring other countries, more specifically Africa, and changing their marriage laws to be more open to same-sex relations in Africa, to their credit, pushed back heavily against that, because it was like, yeah, we don't want American influence essentially trying to say that, we should allow, gay marriage and gay unions and stuff like that. But like I said, that's coming from African nations. I don't think that Japan has that kind of pushback or kickback that those African nations do, like
They
not
don't.
Nigeria.
The Japanese have a far less they're far less cultural barriers to what wokeism is, and like I explained earlier, they are a society that doesn't seek to offend. So they will keep their opinions about these folks that want to chop off the genitals of children to themselves. You
Yeah,
see,
and we pretend like
and
everything's fine when it's clearly not.
right. Bearbeard Whiskers points out here, he says, BlackRock threatened Nintendo that if they don't make Zelda the new movie where Link is saved by the princess, then they will spread rumors that the movie is woke. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
It's funny. Do you
yep.
remember the video game came out not too long ago, Hitman 2, the updated Hitman video games, where the kind of the whole premise was is that Agent 47 was going up against this entity called Providence, which is like this secret society of like, corporate billionaires who were simply influencing the world all over the place. It kind of seems like someone was making a commentary about BlackRock before a lot of people knew what BlackRock actually was, right? I find that a little bit odd.
Right. And again, I mean, like at the center of all this is them because they passed the laws, DEI laws that require this kind of capitulation to folks who have Tumblritis,
Yes.
and that's how that is, they have passed the laws, they bought the senators, and now these companies have to get a certain score in order to qualify for loans. And that's why you
Yeah.
see this stuff happen. But there you go.
Right.
You're getting rid of cleavage, you're getting rid of digital physical assets for digital download games. You have to pay months worth of subscriptions in order to enjoy. And they're going to be crap and unfinished when you get them anyway, and most likely have some weird secret pedo message in them about adults and children having relationships together, Ooh, yeah, relationship.
Hmm. The moral of the story is just buy a Sega Genesis. Your life would be
Right.
much better if you just
Get the Sega
never
channel.
went. Exactly. If you never graduated past Sega, you'd be fine. But outside of that, that's when things get a little bit of murky there. So
And again, that was the theme for tonight was weird relationships. It was Jenna Ortega's movie, Miller's Girl. Jacob's review for that is right up on the channel. So when this stream is over with, feel free to click over to the latest uploaded video, excuse me, the second latest uploaded video, and check that out because it follows along with this theme of adults having weird relationships with children. It's one thing to have characters that have cleavage in your video games and stuff like that. It's entirely different to be putting movies together that make it okay for adults and children to be in relationship.
intermingling, like I guess
Yeah,
this is the PC way of saying it.
I guess. But that brings us to the end of the show. Jacob, you do have a show a little later tonight, right? The Bible Lens.
Yeah, Bible Lens podcast is about 1 hour from now at 8 o'clock. We're going to be talking about if Christian nationalism is actually heresy or not. So we'll get into a deep discussion about that. And then obviously my other two shows I got coming up. I have the Bar Room tomorrow night. Our good buddy Lofty Pixels is going to be on the show tomorrow night, talk about some of these things. On Friday, we're going to be doing a review on Argyle on the Friday night show. And oh yeah, I still have a couple of more movie reviews that should be up on the YouTube show later this week. So you should be seeing a little bit more reviews later on. So
Righteous. Righteous.
yep.
Yep. We got Bear Beard Whiskers here. It says, I started creating again. I went back to drawing. I'm sick of my heroes getting crapped on. Well, now's the
All I
time.
have to say, all I have to say is gatekeep the crap out of your content property, because the last thing you want is somebody else getting their filthy little hands on it and
Well,
pooping all over it. So
before we close down tonight, I did want to point out that on that note, on that particular note, Eric July will be on the channel tomorrow, 3 o'clock in Eastern Standard Time to discuss with BIC contributor Mark Claire the state of the rising indie media market. That's right. So
mm-hmm.
you're picking up drawing again because your heroes are getting crapped on. There are thousands of others of us that feel the same way. That got started making our own properties to retake Western storytelling and perhaps evolve it into a new way, a new method, a new genre. But that'll be tomorrow at 3 p.m. Feel free to tune in over there. The stream is like The stream holder is up there right now, so feel free to click that notify me button when you see it over there under the live tab. And we'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. for Eric July and Mark Claire. Thank you very much for being here tonight, and we'll see you in the next one.